Allison's family and friends from Jim Heyman. As some of you know, Glenn's older sister Cheryl is my wife. We live in Iowa and will not be able to join you today, but we are certainly thinking of you all there at this time. Cheryl and I have been married 38 years next month, which is how long I knew Glenn. I met him the year we were married in 1976, and we were friends for all of those years. 2 weeks ago today, I called Tricia at the hospital where Glenn was and asked her to put her phone to his ear. I don't know whether he could hear me or not. I like to think he could. Here's what I said. Glenn, this is your favorite brother-in-law. I know you are very sick. We are praying for you and for the doctors that they will know exactly how to care for you. We know you are in God's hands. I also want to say thank you for all the years you welcomed me into your family as a brother. Your friendship, respect, and kindness toward me was always very genuine and very much appreciated. I am grateful for the many years I have known you, and I also thank you for always letting me know that you were glad I married your sister. That was a very nice gift and has always meant a lot to me. Thank you for your love. I want you to know that I love you. Goodbye, Glenn. This next letter is from Cheryl. Glenn James Allenson was born on May 8, 1953, the second of 6 children born to Evelyn and Clifford Allenson in San Francisco. Cheryl, Donna, Aaron, Tricia, and Becky are his other siblings. His parents and many other relatives are from Rhode Island, where most still live. He has only seen most of his other extended family once or twice in his life, as is the case with most of us, with the exception of a few relatives who lived closer. My mom almost didn't make it to the delivery room, so eager was he to enter the world. And as we all know, Glenn had a passion and a zest for life. He couldn't get enough of it. Above all, he loved people, music, cars, and all God's creatures, among many other things. Of course, he also had a number of lovely girls that he dated and several long-term relationships, but never married or had any children of his own. He sure loved his nephews, my sons, and had fun with them. He was ready and willing at the drop of a hat to help most anyone who asked, and was equally as skillful playing beautiful guitar songs as he was working on cars, or as he spent most of his working years doing construction. Glenn was a happy-go-lucky, spunky little boy, growing up in his early years in the Noe Valley in San Francisco. As his older sister, it was just he and I for the first 5 years, and we were only a little more than a year apart. He enjoyed visiting our only cousin in the area, Mike, whose father was a state park ranger. We spent many happy holidays with them, wherever they were stationed up and down the California coastal state parks. He loved the out-of-doors and all of nature and God's creatures, great and small. Boy, he loved to play all kinds of games, and had a very sharp, active imagination. Once he took all the shoes out of the closet and lined them up. My mom asked what it was he was doing. He said it was a shoo-shoo train. A few times, while watching Godzilla and King Kong on TV, he got very upset when the planes and guns attacked them, crying, "Why are they hurting them?" He was inconsolable even when my mom tried to explain it was just a movie and not for real. He had such a heart for animals, even big monsters. And we had our share of squabbles as siblings, but no one better pick on my little brother out in the neighborhood. Times were much simpler in the 50s and early 60s, and our little family grew to 6 with my sister Donna and Aaron. We played outside most of the time, watched a little TV, and loved jumping on beds and flipping down from the top of the bunk beds. Glenn did it best. It tested my mom's patience, though. When he got his first bike at about 9 years old, he decided to ride down our steep street on Valley Street. He got going too fast and crashed at the bottom, hurting himself pretty badly. He gave my parents quite a scare, but recovered, and never did he ever want to try that again. When he was 10, our family moved to Brisbane. My parents really wanted to raise us in a small town like the ones they grew up in Rhode Island. Here, a whole new world opened up to Glenn. So many new places to explore in the hills, at the rec center, and new friends to make. He made friends easily and was always well liked at school. He also said a prayer to receive Jesus as his Savior. I remember him praying it. He had a very soft heart. By now, this was the mid-60s, and he began to show an interest in music and the guitar. As a young teen, he listened intently to the songs on the radio, and mostly by ear, picked up the tunes and the chords on the guitar. He was a natural. Then came the Beatles and other bands from Great Britain and the U.S. He loved the Beatles. He spent so many hours listening to the radio and trying to win tickets to the Beatles concert at the Cow Palace, and he did. He even took my mom. She was so excited to go. All of this love of 60s rock music just fueled his desire to play guitar. And he eventually got an electric guitar and amp, then a few other pieces of equipment. My, how the house shook. And that is how Glenn's Garage was born. He wore his Beatles haircut to school and couldn't wait to get home to practice. Little incident where Glenn decided to plant a garden next to the police practice firing range. It wasn't your typical vegetable garden, but shall we say it was kind of an herb garden. And apparently the police decided it wasn't quite the right kind of herb garden, and Glenn had to spend a little time at Hillcrest to come up with some alternative activities that the nice policeman considered more useful than his herb garden. And he did. He was a model inmate, showing good behavior and exhibiting strong leadership among the other young men at the camp. Not only was he really sterling for good behavior, but built some speakers to boot, showing the other boys how to make them as well. He learned his lesson well. Enough said. And as far as his great love for animals, may I share another little story. There was a little scratching, squealing noise coming from inside our stove, where the oven and burner controls were. He and my dad discovered while opening the top that a very pregnant mama mouse had gotten herself stuck inside. He and my dad very carefully and tenderly worked to free her, loaded her up in a box, and drove her up the hill and let her go. That's the kind of guy he was, caring for God's own. By now, the late 60s arrived, and the hippie subculture with it, and Brisbane was no exception. All the young people, well, most anyway, let their hair grow, wore bell-bottoms, long dresses, tie-dye shirts. Glenn was right in the thick of things, and our house became a gathering place for a lot of the young people of Brisbane. Weekend parties, lots of people, fun music, and other miscellaneous accoutrements that enhanced the social atmosphere became the norm at Glenn's Garage. At this point, I must say sorry to our neighbors for all the noise back then. And of course, who can forget the friendly neighborhood peace officers that would come to pay a visit most weekends, encouraging Glenn to turn down the volume a bit and to make sure it really was soda pop everyone was drinking, and assuring the nice cops that indeed those strong aromas were nothing more than the incense they bought at Pier 1 or Cost Plus. Well, I think there was a lot of turning a blind eye to many things like that in those days. At least the kids were behaving themselves for the most part and not causing any problems outside of noise. Correct me if I'm wrong out there, if anyone has more of an inside scoop, wink wink. After elementary and intermediate school in Brisbane, he attended Jefferson High. Not being much into sports, he continued to hone his musical abilities, host the best parties, and began to work in construction remodeling. He found he really enjoyed it, was excellent at it, and continued this as his career for over 40 years. He had his hand in many projects in town, as well as beyond. He also had a love of cars, and along with my dad and his friends, spent many hours working on them. He loved to work with his hands, whether it was plucking his guitar, pulling out old spark plugs, or doing a great-looking remodel job. He lived most of the rest of his life in Brisbane. He loved his town. Glenn did make quite a mark in Brisbane in more ways than one. He had many friends and acquaintances here. On March 11, 2014, Glenn passed away peacefully, having lived a full life. He will be sorely missed. All of my siblings and I thank each and every one of you for the love and friendship you freely gave to Glenn, as he freely gave of himself as well. Rest in peace, little brother. We love you and miss you. Signed, Cheryl Allenson Heyman, Donna Allenson, Aaron Allenson, Tricia Allenson, and Becky Allenson. Thank you.
Okay, well, here we are at Glenn's Memorial, and it is, I don't even know what date it is, yes, March 29th, 2014. And Glenn's friends have come from all over the country to remember Glenn, and we're waiting for his sister to show up, actually with him. And so there's all the wonderful people that came to Glenn Allison's memorial service here at Brisbane Community Center. That's all for now. Hi, how you doing? Just doing a little video for the family that I'll make DVDs for anybody that wants them. And Don Black.
Andrew bought Kaiser.
And a lot of people have brought, oh well, we don't have much of a picture board going, but we're working on it. I'm just going to shoot this continually, that way it's not broken up. We have some
I worked for the San Francisco Water Department, and I was working up off of Dolores Street in the city. And here comes Glenn, and he's like, "Oh, hey, Paul, what are you doing, this and that?" And I go, "What are you doing up here?" "I'm looking for my Corvette." I was like, "You're looking for your Corvette?" He's like, "Yeah. I had some girl spend the night, and I woke up this morning, my keys were gone, and my car was gone. And I was told that my car is somewhere in this neighborhood, is where she lives." I'm like, "Okay." He goes, "So if you see it, can you kind of help me out and maybe get my car back?" So about an hour later, here comes this Corvette down the street. I'm like, "I don't believe it. That's his car." So I went and didn't have a cell phone. I had to go call the police. And they said, "Okay, we're going to send a couple detectives out, and they're going to be parked right down the street in a gray car. When you see the girl, kind of give the wave." So about an hour went by, and here comes the girl out of the house in a wedding dress. And so I gave the wave, and they came over and arrested her. And supposedly she was on her way up to Reno to get married in Glenn's car. So I didn't have any way of getting a hold of Glenn because I didn't have a cell phone, of course, and didn't have Glenn's number. And then when the police said, "Well, we're going to call for a tow truck and have it impounded," I'm thinking, "Oh, great, that's the last thing he needs is the cost of towing and impound." So I pleaded with them to keep the car there, and I would get Glenn and come and get the car, and then they informed me that they couldn't keep it there. So they agreed to have somebody drive it down to the station, and then I, got a hold of Glenn, and Glenn got his car back, and right till just a year ago, when Glenn would see me, he'd say, "Hey, see that guy right there? He saved my car for me." So, Glenn was always had something nice to say, always. He'd always ask you how you were doing. And, there were times when I knew Glenn wasn't doing too well, but that was okay because, life was good and he did what he could and, he touched me. And so it's people like him in my life that are encouraging to know that, we can do what we can to help others and continue work like he has done. So I just want to thank everybody for being here, and thank you, Jeri, for allowing me to speak.
Pressure washing, Glenn worked for me from the very beginning. And he was absolutely fabulous. He would get up in the pouring rain at 5 o'clock in the morning. Quite often when I had to go out and I was scheduled to go to work, I would hire Glenn to go out with me because that way I would get out of bed. Otherwise, a lot of mornings I wouldn't. But I would always tell my clients, like, all right, this fellow named Glenn's going to arrive. Now, he's a bit strange looking, but he really makes it up in enthusiasm. Right. And sure enough, he would do a great job and not only sell the customer on that it was a great job, but also would sell both neighbors on each side. So we did very well with him going out. The story that does remind me that of something is that I have 2 boys, and one's a bit odd. And Glenn had the keys to my house and the codes to the house and all the phone numbers for me. And when I went down to Brisbane Elementary and they were asking me to fill out emergency information, I put down Glenn's name. And the person who knew Glenn looks at his name and looks up at me and goes, "Are you sure about this?" Well, there's nobody else I would call.
I have to go about how Glenn was always willing to help. Always. There was never a time when he wouldn't want to help. He didn't always come through. Oh, should I mention that? But he was always willing to help, and he was really, really good at some of the stuff he did, like carpentry and stuff like that. I remember living at a house on Alvarado Street rented by the DeMarcos, which was in, shall we say, politely shabby condition. Glenn spent, weeks redoing the framing and the ceiling, the walls, the floor, and everything else that had been damaged through neglect. And he did a fantastic job, and he charged me, as little as I could pay him. But we always had a real good time. And he and his brother Aaron have been real good friends of mine since I've been in Brisbane, which has now been about 23 years. I didn't know Glenn quite that long, but he was always a magnificent human being who sometimes really pissed me off. But he was a magnificent human being, and I think it's a great thing that we're all here today to honor him. And Glenn, you had a wonderful life. Thank you.
On several occasions, I had the experience of asking Glenn for some help, of doing things that other people either wouldn't try or were capable of doing. And one was when we moved to our home on Humboldt. There was this little crawl space that had been left totally loaded with who knows what. He said, "Oh, I can do it? Oh yeah, anytime." And so when I come home, in one day, the whole place is cleared out. It's stacked according to this is usable, this isn't usable, and I'm going, whoa. So today when I thought of an image that I would think describes Glenn to me is, and this isn't him, I found it on the internet and our printer's not working, but it's a man on a handmade ladder getting to the roof. Because if there wasn't a ladder, Glenn would make one. Glenn would find a way to make it work. And while I don't know the actual story, he proceeded to tell me about a time where he had gone up a ladder and wasn't completely belayed the right way and slipped and dangled upside down for half an hour or more. Some of you might know the story or not. And I said, "Glenn, this is what I love about you, but this is also what I fear about you, is that, you will attempt to do something that is beyond my comfort level." And so in that, I just truly love somebody, love Glenn dearly, and again, the same experience as Paul Buscal. He would see that you had something in the back of your car and can I help you? Can I help you move it? The most wonderful person I know, and I'm really sorry to hear that we've lost her.
I got quite a few Glenn stories, but talk about the most prominent one for me. I'm a relative newcomer to Brisbane. I moved here in '95. Rather, in '95 I got lost here and drove into town and discovered there was no gas station here. And after seeing somebody had painted this big sign next to the Brisbane Inn that said, "Pray for Anita," I thought, wow, what a strange place. I kind of want to live here. So I ended up moving here, renting a house for a few years. And, I got kicked out of the house, but I didn't want to move, so I bought the empty lot next door and started digging, thinking, well, I'll just build a house. How hard can it be? And well, I found out it was pretty hard. And so I well, I need some people to help me do this. So I started driving around town looking at jobs that were doing excavation and concrete, because that's what I was doing. And there was this one job where there was about 8 people working, and Glenn was there working away, building this this form for the concrete and go, wow, that's the guy. Look at him go. He's the guy I need to help me. So I went up to him and asked him. I thought it was kind of odd the stranger would come up to him and ask him to pour concrete, but he was up for it. So he came over to my place, and he brought Aaron with him too, and we started building forms. And the first slab we poured had to have a special inspection on it. So the inspector came out about midway through our pour, and we found that just between the three of us, the job was a bit too big, and it was getting away from us, and the trucks kept coming, and none of us were very good at screeding the top. So this lady, who's the special inspector, shows up, and she's watching us, and she's just kind of shaking her head, and she goes, you know, this is very non-standard, but what the hey. So she went and got her rubber boots and jumped in the concrete and showed us how to finish the concrete off. And so she kind of saved us on that one. But past that, Glenn was extremely helpful with all kinds of odd jobs in the house, things that I really couldn't find a trade to do. The framing, of course, a lot of, and every now and then there would be some weird job that came up, and I'll just ask Glenn. And Glenn would either know how to do it or find somebody that could. And it came down to kitchen cabinets, and I was surprised. Glenn can do a fantastic job on laying out kitchen cabinets. And yeah, thanks Glenn for everything you did to help around the house and other things too.
I'm Glenn's younger sister, Tricia. A lot of you probably remember me as Patty, and a lot of you I've known for ever since I was a really little girl. You know, driving into town, I moved away several years ago thinking I'd come back here, and it broke my heart when I knew that that wasn't going to happen at that time. And Jeri and Joe and everybody that put this together, I am so, so grateful. There's something special about growing up in a town like this that I try to communicate to people who haven't grown up in towns like this, that have extended family. And I am just eternally grateful that Glenn had all of you. I'm enjoying hearing the stories. It was definitely an experience growing up at 427 Alvarado. And there was never a dull moment. And you know, when I think back and look at some of the quiet times I had, I would go down in Glenn's garage when he wasn't there, and I would sit inside one of the cars that he was working on. And that's where I would have my little private quiet time. When I got the call it was 2 weeks ago, almost 3 weeks ago now, that Glenn was in the hospital and he wasn't doing well. There was something that came over me. There's something in the back of my mind. There's a way I think that we prepare for death. And we prepare for our siblings. You know, we've already lost our mom and dad. And I guess, you know, it's one thing to think about it, but to actually get the call. And I'm grateful that I was able to be close enough to get down there. I got down there within about an hour and a half. And by the time I got there, he was in ICU, and he wasn't conscious, but he was still present. That makes sense. They had him sedated because they had him intubated. But it was not easy to walk into that room. And the doctor said, you know, it's not good, he can go anytime. But I tell you, there was something, when I walked in that room, there was a peace and a sense of relief and a feeling of love that just, it was so palpable. And I'm not going to say that it was within me. I think it was within me, within Glenn, maybe within the whole room. But it allowed me to be with him in such a way that I felt like I can just really hold the space And I felt very drawn to stand close to him at his bedside. And I put my hand on his chest, on his heart. I just felt like I needed to touch his heart. And I told him, I said, Glenn, it's Tricia, I'm here with you, you're not alone. You're not going to be alone, I'm going to be with you. And I said, whatever you have to do, if you're going to fight to stay here, then fight to stay here. But if you need to let go, then let go. It's okay. We're going to be okay. And I told him how loved he is and how many people's lives he's touched, because I know he has. And I thanked him for being one of the best big brothers a girl could have. He and Aaron, I just feel so grateful for both of them. You know, I've got a ton of Glenn stories, but, you know, for me, they're probably very ordinary stories, but extraordinary. I had, you know, like we all do, I had my trying times in my teenage years, and there were some hard things that I had to come to face. And I remember when I came out and I talked to Glenn about it, and I was so scared that my family was going to reject me. And Glenn told me, hey, Tricia, I've had some experiences myself. It's not that big a deal. Just be who you are. And there were so many times that I would have these little confessionals with him, and I would bring these things to him and think that they were such a big deal, and I was so shameful about them. And he'd tell me something that he did that was 10 times worse. You know, he made it okay to be me. He made it okay to be human. And he was always there for me like that. And as I was talking to him, and the idea had popped into my head from somewhere to post the number on Facebook and to have people either call in or send messages. And I put the phone up to his ear and put it on speaker, and I was fine until the people started talking and they started crying and I started crying. But it was so touching, and it was such a gift and so humbling to be able to do that. Glenn wasn't just a big brother to me. He was a very dear friend. And we're an odd family in that we don't see each other a lot, we don't necessarily talk a lot, but when we come together, it's as if no time has passed. And there's a closeness there that is a bond that I can't really articulate. And Glenn, he wrote some great stories. I was up late last night. There's a website called Gather, and if you want to go on there, one of the stories I read, I think, was Full Circle. Just it was such a well done short story. And he was so talented and so smart. And very much someone who considered other people and cared about other people, and made effort to make a difference in their lives. I'm not sure what else to say. Maybe something else will come up, but I am forever changed and forever grateful to have had Glenn in my life. And you know, I feel a little bit of a giddiness and an excitement, too, when I was driving down here today, because it is a celebration of him. It's a celebration of his life and who he is, who he was, who he is now. Because I don't think he's gone. A very short, quick, I went through a really difficult time when I broke up with someone a long time ago that I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with, and it brought up a whole lot of losses that probably had nothing to do with that relationship. But I said a prayer, and I said a prayer to my mom, who had passed away years and years ago, and I said, Mom, if there was ever a time I needed to know you were with me, now is it. And the very next morning I went to work, and it's when I owned my little business. And I opened up the door, and the gal who was working for me reached her hand out, and she said, does this mean anything to you? And I looked down, and in her hand was a quarter with a hole drilled in the top. And I immediately thought, well, it does if it's a Rhode Island quarter. My mother was from Rhode Island. And I grabbed the quarter out of her hand and I looked at it, and sure enough, it was a Rhode Island quarter. And I said, where did you get this? And she said, well, a customer just walked up to the window and said, make sure Trish gets this. And that was a prayer answered from me. So I believe that somehow, somewhere, that energy is still there, that love, that presence is still there. I think Dario Nardico wrote something about a visitation he had from his mom, that after she died, she came to him, and she was young and very vibrant and very beautiful, and said, this is what happens after we die. We go back to the time that we were the happiest and we were the most vibrant and the most grounded in life. She said, don't be sad for us. We're just here waiting for you. And that's what that picture over there reminded me of. Glenn, very youthful, with the sun shining in his face. Check it out when you leave. It's over by the guitar. But I thought that was more fitting to. I went and picked up Glenn's remains, and they weren't supposed to be ready for the service, and I was pleasantly surprised when they called me, and I went and grabbed them. But I didn't have anything to put them in, and I thought it'd be better to have a guitar case rather than that funky plastic urn they gave me. So it was funny going around to all the guitar shops with my brother in a bag, so the guys are like, what brings you here today? And I'm like, Wonk, my big brother. It was shock value when they read the label and it said, cremated remains of Glenn J. Allenson. But that's just part of it. Anyway, thank you again for everything you've done to put this together, you guys. And please come up and share the stories, because being a younger sister, I didn't get a lot of this really fun stuff that on the opportunity, so please come and share.
By the time I moved here, I had already moved 6 times in my life. My mother had already divorced my father, and in fact by that time my mother had already died. So my stepdad at the time worked in South San Francisco, and he said to us yet again, we're going to move. We're going to move so he could be closer to his work. So I just started my sophomore year in high school in the city, and of course, you know, here we go again, right? We're going to move again. Where the hell are we going to move to now? We're going to move to this place called Brisbane, right? Brisbane? Where is that? Okay, so, you know, finally we get here. We lived on Sierra Point Road at the time. So, you know, I was, first of all, if what you said is true about coming back when you were the happiest, I think I might have come back as a teenager living in Brisbane. I think that might top things. But anyway, so, you know, I guess I started meeting people around town. And, you know, I guess they must still take a school bus to Jefferson every day. Living in Brisbane was kind of like living on an island, right? Because, you know, you get on the bus, and you're on your little island, and you go to the mainland, and then you get off the bus, and there's, you know, hundreds and hundreds of people, and I think at the time we might have had 2 buses. There was one that stopped up the street here, and I think one stopped on the other side of town. So, you know, the people that stopped, you know, it was the same people every day at the bus stop, right? So I think Rich, you were on the bus stop here, and Glenn was here, and a bunch of other people were here. But, you know, I started meeting people around town, and, you know, of course, Glenn was one of the people that I met as well as several other of you. And, you know, everyone really made me feel welcome. You know, there was never any oddness about the situation, right? They were like, okay, you're from somewhere else, that's okay, you just moved here, that's okay. You know, come and be a part of our group, right? And, you know, since I'd moved so many times, I'd never really been a part of a group, so I didn't really know, you know, what that meant, but I just kind of hung out with people. And, yeah, Glenn's garage, I guess, became kind of like a home away from home. I think that'd be like a parent's worst nightmare. I have a 15-year-old daughter now, so just the idea is kind of gets me to shake. But anyway, you know, every weekend, I mean, in fact, every night, I think, you know, we could go to Glenn's, and, you know, it's sort of like a meeting place, right? I think there wasn't this community center at the time, and Glenn's was kind of for us, Glenn's was like the community center. And, you know, strangely enough, again, I was telling someone earlier, you know, no one kind of kept track of my comings and goings at the time. I was sort of able to sort of do what I wanted to do. There wasn't really much to do at my house. You know, I had a little sister who, you know, had nothing in common with. My stepdad was sort of asleep early because he had to go to work. So Glenn and I would spend a lot of, we were always sort of the last ones there at his garage during the week. And of course Glenn had to be there because he was, you know, he was living there. Right? He was living in the garage, which seemed totally normal, you know, at the time. He had his bed, remember the garage had this 3 or 4 tiers and had a big cement thing.
I'll be in Brisbane.
And his bed was way up on the top tier, and he made a jump on the couches or something to get to the top or something. I don't know. He had all this furniture in there and stuff. Very tastefully decorated.
Garages go.
Yeah, garages go. But you know, we would always hang out, you know, on school nights, you know, 8:30, 9:30, whatever. And then I remember we'd always have to watch the time because there was that corner grocery store up the street that would close. I think they closed at 10. So we always had to make sure to watch the time. So we had to get down to the grocery store before they closed, so we could go get our, you know, Twinkies and, you know, Ho-Hos and Dum-Dums and whatever else we got. But in the 3 years where I was still here for high school and then afterwards, I think really the thing that I got out of that time, and Glenn was a big part of it, was just the whole sense of community, right? It was the first time for me that I ever really kind of felt like I belonged somewhere. And it was because Glenn and everyone else here, you know, made me feel real comfortable. And that was a value that I cherished at the time, and I still cherish, because it's something that you don't really find that many places. And I don't know if it's just because it's a small town or what, but you know, it's really a big thing. It's really important. So it's good to hear that everybody here is still here and able to maintain that sense of community. And I'm glad to hear that Glenn was able to stay here and do that too. So thanks a lot.
Trish, you really touched me. You did a fantastic job, and I want to say I think you're very blessed to have your brothers in your life and your whole family. I'm very familiar where you live because when I was a kid, I had a girlfriend that lived there, and so the house was always in focus to me. And I remember when you all moved there, you were little guys, little kids. And then getting back to Brisbane, people keep saying, oh, you know, it's Brisbane. But you know what? In my opinion, I wonder if us here now are a different breed of people. Because I wonder if the people that are here, that have moved here new people that have moved here now, will have the same camaraderie that you all had. I'm a lot older, but I remember you guys when you were growing up. And I just think it's so sweet. It's so wonderful. I just hope that they can keep that going, because Brisbane today is so different. Anyway, I want to say about Glenn, when we moved over here in '63, Glenn was putting up a garage for the neighbor. And so I'd see him every day. He was always very personable, always there in his tee, in that, what do you call it? Tank top, T-top, yeah. And even when it was cold, and I think, oh wow, that guy must got hot blood or something. But Glenn was always a really nice guy, and I always think of people like that. They're the salt of the earth, you know. They're just good people, nice people. And I haven't seen him for a long time, so I did wonder, you know, what happened. Then Cheryl's on Facebook, so we kind of all connected again, and I think that's great. Good to see you.
In later years, Glenn and I would talk about things, and I would question some of the things the theories he had. And I always enjoyed discussing these ideas with him because he had some way of tying in something else, and they were based on stuff. I always enjoyed talking to Glenn. Getting back to the way it was, Dolores, you were saying something about the camaraderie. And yes, we'd have parties that would go on for a day or so up at the campsite. And they were orderly, and we never littered or anything like that. But it was socialized, drinking pretty much. And we all got along, I don't think there was ever a fight, and Glenn always had rationality on his side. If you were talking to him about something, he would eventually say, okay, here's all the facts, and you would eventually have to say, well, okay, you got a point there. So he would never just say, okay. He would always lead you in a discussion that you both would come to the realization that, okay, this is something that's possible or we should consider. So I always enjoyed just talking with the guy. And yes, we had a lot of good times. And one time in the garage, we got the idea of putting a hook in the ceiling, because it was a high ceiling, and then we got a gallon of Red Mountain Burgundy and tied a rope on it, and you'd be able to swing it across to the other person. We weren't restricted to passing it around necessarily.
Well, it's going to become tough to read. Glenn is one of the greatest friends I ever had. I wrote a eulogy on one piece of paper here. My name is Tim Lawrence, and Glenn is one of the greatest friends I ever had. But I'll start out by reading it. Many things could be said of Glenn, one of the greatest friends I ever had that's not blood family. He respected all life, bugs, spiders, etc. When he bought food, he always shared with me without asking returns. Gave me a roof over my head several times when I could have had none. He even argued with his beloved parents over me when I might have overstayed my welcome. He took me in the city, no problem, when my stepfather kicked me out of the house in Brisbane. He let me stay for a while at his girlfriend's, probably to her chagrin, in South San Francisco. Glenn and I virtually hit it off right away when he moved to Brisbane in 4th grade. My love life was enhanced by our girlfriends, of which I had good fortune around Glenn, usually involving our guitar playing and singing together. Glenn was one hell of a finger picker and singer, and I virtually always felt comfortable with music while in his presence together. Being a musician myself, in grammar school, Glenn, as I recall, took over first chair for a while, playing trumpet. His intellect and humor excelled. He had a penchant for reminiscing good times. When my beautiful mother, inside and out, passed away of multiple cancer, he took me in intermittently in a house in San Bruno. Glenn was a novice short story writer also, and I personally loved his stories. They always had a great moral spin to them. My friends were kind enough to invite me to this beautiful memorial to what I consider to be a kind, gentle, and great man. He employed me for a while as his carpentry trade helper, and I'm glad and honored that he did. He taught me a lot, and he also was a natural-born carpenter. It's a great honor to have known Glenn, and his brother Aaron is also musically inclined, and I think he is going to recover from his operation well. Being rather religious myself, I prayed for my friends, family, kin, and people I care about platonically. Aaron is my dear friend also, and he's also very intelligent. We lost a great man in Glenn, who I believe is at peace at home, but gained so much brotherly and sisterly love. Yes, Glenn, you'll always be a great friend to many of us. Thank you to all the fine people who invited me here. I'll always love you, Glenn, as you loved me.
Hi, I'm Jim Cooper. I guess sort of an outsider because I came from over the hill when I first started playing in the Brisbane Baseball League up here, and got to meet some musicians over here, and through the musicians I got to meet Glenn. Oh, I jumped ahead of myself. First I want to thank Jeri and Joe. Thanks for putting this on. This is really, really nice. Yeah. So, like it was pointed out before, there was a type of camaraderie over here that wasn't over the hill. And I mean, I would walk over here every day because Brisbane was alive. I mean, there was just kids everywhere. It was alive. And Glenn and I turned out to have a lot in common. We were kindred spirits. And being so, we had our little macho contest. You know, who could throw the empty wine bottle the farthest? You know, who could supercharge the most Schlitz malt liquors? Who could climb the highest tree? You know, real important stuff like that. And about the adventures, and that was nice. Glenn's sister, what you said. I think I've heard you twice. Once was on the phone, and every time you talked, I get choked up. So thank you very much for that. And the wild adventures is what I have an unlimited amount with me and Glenn. Somebody mentioned the time about the ladder, him hanging. Yeah. We were sneaking into Winterland. Crosby, Stills, and Nash. We went up on the roof. There was this old rickety ladder, like 4 stories up. We climbed down and the ladder was breaking. And he's hanging there. I said, Glenn, hang on. I go back up the ladder and boost him up. And so we climb down all 4 stories, get to the escape, the fire exit, pounding on the door, you know, let us in. Nobody could hear us. We had to climb all the way back up. So, and then we did stuff like, I don't know, going around corners real fast, and Glenn flying out, the door flies open, and he's hanging on the door, and very calm. You know, just, hey Jim, could you pull over? You know? Yeah, no problem, man. You know? So, you know, there was an unlimited bunch of those. The campsite stories, the Mount Tam party that, I mean, we're all up there. Everybody from back in the day. And Joe was throwing a rock for his dog Jonah, who would jump into the darkness and come back with it. It must have been 30 to 50 people up there. That was pretty cool. So Glenn was a driving force in Briz, but it extended. You know, Mount Tam, Russian River. We went all over the place. And so later on, Glenn started doing contracting work, and it seemed like he was always busy. And every time he would come over, he'd have a house jacked, the whole house jacked up. And I'd ask him, "What are you doing?" "Oh, I'm fixing the foundation." And I have never seen anybody jack a house up before. But he was like an expert at all that stuff. You know, putting in plumbing, he built these beautiful custom cabinets for Greg Lay, the Lightning on Demand Tesla coil guy. Beautiful. And every morning, this is lately, in the last 6 months, every morning he'd be up at 4 a.m. to go to his curb appeal gig, and he was determined to stand by Aaron, his brother, and so he never stopped. I never knew he was sick. I mean, I've seen him 2 weeks before he passed. We went up and we played music together, which was a blessing, and was a surprise to me when he passed. He hit it really well. Anyway, he was a special guy, and he's always remained a good friend to me. I mean, we were lifelong friends. I've known him since '67, when I was 17, and till now. And I loved him like a brother, man. He's with God now, Mother Nature, as Glenn called him, and we'll meet up again soon. And I got a song for you, Glenn, of course.
Got a pick, Jim?
Got one, thanks. All right. The song's for Glenn. Hey, Glenn! Glenn! Help me out, okay?
Yeah.
Glenn!
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 All right.
What the hell you doing up there without me?
Well, we all need someone we can lean on. And if you want to, well, you can lean on me. Well, we all need someone we can lean on. And if you want to, babe, well, you can lean on me. I was thinking about my friend Glenn up in heaven. I was dreaming. Debbie, forgot the last line.
It's all right, so easy.
And when mother opens the door, I wrote down the lyrics and I forgot. One more time. Well, we all need someone we can lean on. And if you want to win, well, you can lean on me. Well, we all need someone we can lean on. And if you want to win, well, you can lean on me. See you soon, Glenn.
Well, yeah, I kind of showed it to him. It's real simple. The song is called For No One. The day breaks your mind aches. You find that all the words of kindness linger on when she no longer needs you. No one does, you need her, and yet you don't believe it when she says her lover said you think she needs you. And in her eyes you see nothing son of love behind the tears, cry for no one. A love that should have lasted years. She stays home, she goes out, she says it long ago she knew someone. Now he's gone, she doesn't need him. Day breaks, your mind aches, there'll be times around things to say. Because your head, can't mess it up. And in her eyes you see nothing. No sign of love behind the tears, cry for no one. A love that should have lasted years.